Now, for those who may be new to the Never Stop Media platform, which is highly unlikely, but if you are, on YouTube, we call the channel Never.Stop.Voices because we elevate people's voices. And to give you a little introduction about the company, our mission is to bring the uncensored and raw truth to the people, to tell the stories that mainstream media glosses over or completely ignores, to bring to light and expose corruption in real stories through investigative journalism. The phrase Vox Populi, which you will see on our website, is Latin for the people's voice. We are boots on the ground journalism, bringing you the truth. NSM is not ABC, NBC, Fox, or CNN. We're not the New York Times or the Washington Post. We have no corporate sponsors that decide which stories to run and how the narrative is formed. If every other news organization wants to be stenographers for law enforcement, let them. NSM doesn't write for corrupt agencies who violate people's rights on a daily basis. NSM writes for people whose rights are violated. So when law enforcement says something, we only have one question to ask. Is it true? Our investigations typically take a few months, and some, like events in Kenosha, take a lot longer. On our website, Never.Stop.Voices.com, you will find articles written exposing corruption. And here on our YouTube channel, you will find hundreds of hours of exclusive, never-before-seen videos, live streams of protests. Unfortunately, not all of them, as we lost a lot when our original company Facebook page was permanently removed. We provide breaking news, trial coverage, discussions with viewers, my documenting losing everything with the pandemic, and then some more fun things I wanted to share, like some of my hiking adventures. Never Stop Media is purely a viewer donation-based platform. We do not earn weekly paychecks for the thousands of hours put in researching stories, and the opportunity to research and expose stories relies solely on our viewers' contributions. A little background about me. Prior to where Never Stop Media is today, as far as journalism, I used to expose companies that were defrauding consumers within the fishing industry. In June of 2020, I lost my apartment due to the COVID pandemic, and I was homeless, stealth camping in a hammock for 63 days leading up to the shooting of Jacob Blake. I went out on day 2, commonly referred to as structure fire night. Day 3 for me was Kyle Rittenhouse night. I was on Sheridan Road. Rittenhouse ran right by me, and I watched people get shot and killed right in front of me. After the shooting, I was the only live streamer that went out every night, typically the first to arrive and last to leave. One thing I was very big on was people's rights, and it wasn't until one of those nights filming incident after incident of people's civil rights being violated, which made me question everything. And more importantly, due to a beautiful person who most of you in the movement know as Cammie or Mimi. If it wasn't for her, I would probably not be sitting on this side of history. As you have seen behind me, the image of the Punisher skull. That image is there as well as on the back of my press vest for several reasons. First, it's a nod to Chris Kyle. Having that image on my back makes me feel safe that Chris Kyle is behind me, providing overwatch, keeping me alive. Second, it's my favorite comic book character. Third, in my own form of protest, racists, militia, and law enforcement don't get to use it as a symbol of hate. And last, if you see this symbol with me behind the camera, it's more than likely I'm there to expose corruption that will be punished. I am most notably known for revealing the second garbage truck that was started on fire in Kenosha was done so by a Wisconsin National Guard member prior to being called to active service. The first independent journalist to be arrested in Kenosha during the curfew. The journalist responsible for releasing images of Kyle Rittenhouse holding a beer inside of Pudgy's pub that got his bond conditions modified. The journalist responsible for identifying Jump Kick Man, despite right-wing outlets taking credit for it. The only journalist who has sued Kenosha for open records, and the only journalist who has been publicly attacked with attempts to discredit me by the Kenosha Police Department. I blocked a $49,000 license plate reader grant with a single article. Responsible for holding the court system in the Theo Edgecombe trial accountable and fair by getting an entire 50-person jury panel removed. And most recently, taking the conspiracy theory that law enforcement worked with militia during the 2020 Kenosha Unrest and exposing that it did in fact happen, as well as the Kenosha 2020 curfew was in fact unlawful, and city government and the Kenosha Police Department and the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department lied to the general public. I am one of the most controversial independent journalists in the state of Wisconsin. I have had to move 12 times since August 2020 due to death threats, harassment, stalking, and militia showing up where I live. And yet here I still stand exposing corruption within systems. All right, check. Testing 1, 2, check. All right, so questions. This is the Sharkdog interview, take 2. All right, so hopefully sound is better and the image is a lot better for this. If not, I don't know. I guess fucking let me know and we'll do it over. So question. So what I'll do is I'll say whatever your question was. I'll take a pause and then introduce myself. So the beginning there, I gave you a little 5-minute intro just in case. I don't know if you want to use any of that describes who I am. Feel free to whatever you want to do. But anyway, question. Please introduce yourself and what you do for a living. So my name is Kevin Glowicki. I'm the owner of Never.Stop Media. I am a independent journalist / former live streamer. So I used to live stream in the very beginning. I write articles that are hosted on the website, which is Never.Stop.Voices.com. Our focus is civil rights issues and corruption within systems. We investigate systems, so like law enforcement, courts, government officials, things like that. We do pre-recorded videos. We expose corruption within these different systems. When there's like government grants that are given to cities, such as like automatic license plate readers, things like that, that could potentially violate somebody's civil rights. We focus on that. We write articles or do investigations on officer-involved shootings. So things like that. That's what I do. Started off as a live streamer in Kenosha, live streaming the events from the 2020 unrest following the shooting of Jacob Blake. And that is kind of developed from live streaming to very deep dive investigations and into, let me mute my phone. Of course, there's always something. Always something when you're fucking recording shit. Anyway, started live streaming in Kenosha during the 2020 unrest following the shooting of Jacob Blake. And that has since gone into a 4-year investigation into what really happened in Kenosha, trying to find out the truth. Question, what were you doing the night of the shootings? By Kyle Rittenhouse. Answer. So for me, most people don't know this about me, but I was homeless um, through the pandemic in Kenosha. So for 63 days leading up to the shooting of Jacob Blake and the 9 days of unrest in Kenosha, I was stealth camping in a hammock in parks around Kenosha, trying to figure out my own life. Um, I documented all of that, and I actually put out my own documentary or docu-series. It's like a 15-part docu-series about what my life was going from homeless to journalist. So I missed the first night when Jacob Blake got shot and the riotous activity had started. Went from protest to small riot out in front of the courthouse and in front of the Kenosha Police Department. I had gone out on August 24th, which was my first night, what we kind of call structure fire night, because that's when the city took the most damage in fires. That was my first night of streaming. I kind of went out as a person that just lost everything, and now all of a sudden, riots have made it into the city that I currently live. The night of August 25th, which is Kyle Rittenhouse night, I had gone back out after work because I was working throughout all of this as well. And I went out in more of a media, press, journalist style, not just like this homeless dude that lost everything. So you see me in video clips all around the internet. I got a backwards hat on. I got a bright orange vest on that has press written in marker. A lot of my media gear, my like more professional media gear, was in my storage unit where all of my other property was. So, but yeah, so I had gotten off of work. I got out to the demonstration area at Civic Park around 10 or 10:30 p.m. They had just pushed everybody out of Civic Park and onto Sheridan Road. So that's when I got there. And, I filmed everything. So I was out there on the 24th, structure fire night. I was out there for the shooting. I happened to be in some of the most important areas without really knowing what I was doing at the time. I was very new to all of this. I had never live streamed events or protests. I've never even walked into protest world. So yeah, I was just one of the people that was out there live streaming and happened to be one of the most important people that was out there. I filmed a lot of like my video captures a lot of Kyle Rittenhouse. It captures a lot of Joshua and Kelly Zeminski. I've got a lot of footage of Gage Grosskreutz, Ryan Balsh. I've got Kyle Rittenhouse running past me multiple times. So I've got a lot of video footage that, at the time that you're filming, you don't really know what you're doing, right? You don't really know what you're looking for because you're just trying to film everything and show people, exactly what's going on. And looking back on that footage, surprisingly, there's a lot that I did capture. I was right there when the shooting of Anthony Huber and Gage Grosskreutz happened. I was a few hundred feet down the road. Kyle had ran past me. The shooting incident with Rosenbaum happened. Another live streamer, Andrew Mercado from Mercado Media, he and I were together and we started heading towards gunshots. First time I've ever walked towards gunshots. And then we have Kyle running right past, and then the shooting incident with Anthony and Gage happens. I had taken a step. It's hard to see on the video, but I had taken a step after Anthony was hit. And, what the general public may not have realized or paid attention to at the time, but there was a lot more gunshots that were happening after Rittenhouse's volley, that he had ended. There were rioters that were shooting. There was other militia that was shooting. And Andrew and I were actually taking direct fire. And luckily we were standing by this house where we could kind of duck in, kind of behind a fence and some bushes. And I started pulling people over this fence, trying to get people down because there were bullets coming at us. So yeah, that's what I was doing the night of the actual shooting. Question: what information do you know that the public doesn't know from watching the criminal trial? So the thing about the criminal trial against Kyle Rittenhouse, right, the homicide trial where he's charged with multiple, homicides, reckless endangering safety, the bullshit curfew charge that they stuck him with. There's a lot that didn't make it into that trial that wasn't talked about. And it's unfortunate because there was so much time spent on the curfew. A lot of questions, right? When Kyle was up on the stand and he's being drilled by Binger about this curfew, because they decided to charge him with this disobeying emergency order charge, right? Which is not even a criminal charge. It's a fucking petty local ordinance ticket. And what's crazy about that though, too, and not to defend this kid, but a bunch of us, I was charged with that as well. Even being a journalist, I was the only journalist charged with that. But the general public, I don't think at the time realized that the hundreds of people that did have that charge against them, all of those charges were dismissed, right? If it was just the curfew charge and not some criminal activity attached to it. But we had all gotten our charges dismissed, and the district attorney's office ends up charging this kid with that very late into the game because of backlash. So I've always thought that was absolute bullshit. But what's interesting about that is, so I had for 2 years I had investigated the truth behind the Kenosha curfew, because there was a federal lawsuit against Kenosha for basically violating people's First Amendment rights. And 2 years of investigating what actually happened, trying to obtain these documents, trying to understand the legal steps that need to happen. And what's crazy about that is, we all saw like the emergency orders that went out. People were texted, right? It came on all of our phones. But what maybe the general public doesn't realize is that there has to be legal steps to implementing a curfew, right? And it has to be for a man-made or natural disaster. I think we can all agree that the events surrounding what happened in that 9 days of unrest would definitely deem a man-made disaster, right? $50 million worth of damage done. I think we can all classify that as a man-made disaster. But the legal steps that needed to happen is the county executive is the only one that can implement an emergency curfew order, or special powers have to be given from the alderman to the mayor. And that has to be in a city council meeting and a vote that needs to happen. And none of that happened. Sheriff David Beth from the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, he just implemented this curfew without consulting with all of these people. And the sheriff doesn't have this authority to implement the curfew at all. He has no power to do that. And he implemented the curfew. And in this investigation that we did, we found that the county executive was never present during any meetings. He never gave an order to issue the emergency order, the curfew. And that the alderman never gave the mayor special permissions to even implement a curfew. So we did find out that, days after the 23rd, so it would have been after the shooting incident, right? So the 23rd, 24th, 25th, there still technically wasn't a curfew. It wasn't until after the Rittenhouse shooting incident where the alderman gave special powers to the mayor to extend the curfew. So I mean, you could read the article. It goes into detail. It lists out, all of the aldermen that were there, who wasn't there. That we posted the documents regarding the curfew and the extended powers to extend the curfew and all of these things. But the curfew in itself was not legal. A lot of people kind of believe that the curfew wasn't legal just from a First Amendment standpoint, right? We saw in all these cities that curfews were being implemented, and it was really to shut down free speech or free speech activities, right? Protests and whatnot. And really all the curfew did was ended up hurting the residents and business owners of Kenosha, right? Businesses were shut down by 8 p.m. So, you had hundreds of businesses that lost out on, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It didn't stop any protests. It didn't stop riots. It didn't stop buildings from burning down. But what's unfortunate is that the federal lawsuit, against Kenosha for the curfew ended up being dropped by the attorneys themselves. And what most people don't know is that the plaintiffs on that lawsuit stopped being in contact with the attorneys that were trying to fight for their rights because they were unlawfully arrested. The reason behind that this is just some extra tidbit information, is because of an incident that happened where in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, which is just a little bit north of Kenosha, Wauwatosa Police Department had created an illegal protester list, which they called a target list, and it listed a lot of people that were involved in demonstrations around Southeast Wisconsin, particularly one group, the People's Revolution. And they obtained information about these people through DMV records, which is illegal. And this protester list was created, and that actually scared the shit out of a lot of these different protesters. So what we found out from that is that during the events in Kenosha in August of 2020, Kenosha already had access to this list. So a lot of these people that were out there, Kenosha was able to identify them. So the reason I brought this up is because the federal lawsuit was dropped by the attorneys themselves, and it's because of this target list created by Wauwatosa PD that terrified these protesters enough that a lot of them didn't want to go through with these different lawsuits that were happening. And unfortunately, the federal lawsuit for the target list that went to a jury, and we lost. So that part sucks. What else? Another thing the public doesn't know. So like the identity of Jump Kick Man, right? So during the trial, it was a couple of days before the verdict, or before the jury went to, deliberate, that at the very last minute, the identity of Jump Kick Man was presented to both the state's attorney and Kyle's defense team. Most people don't know I identified Jump Kick Man 7 months prior to any of this happening. His name is Maurice Freeland. The jury never learned that his identity was figured out, which sucks because that was one of the charges that was against Kyle, was shooting at this unnamed victim. And the jury never got to learn that they actually identified him and what his name was. They never got to hear his testimony. Now, from a source, we know that there was a private meeting that was held between all of the attorneys and some other people. Maurice Freeland was in that meeting, and they basically, it was a threat given to Maurice Freeland that Binger basically didn't want him to testify and essentially threatened him, hey, we have you on video starting fires. Now, we have reason to believe that there is no video of Maurice Freeland starting a single fire in Kenosha, and it was a bullshit threat. And while this does sound conspiratorial, and I get that, it damages the state's case, it damages Rittenhouse's case, and it kind of goes against this whole protecting Kenosha's money and their image, where Maurice Freeland, had he got up on the stand, his testimony would have been that he was out there that night. He would have testified to everything that he was doing. And when the first shooting with Joseph Rosenbaum happened, Maurice Freeland would have testified that when that shooting occurred, he actually grabbed somebody that was in a wheelchair and pushed that wheelchair across the street, and then pursued after Kyle Rittenhouse, thinking that this was an active shooter situation. Now, the reason that that's extremely damaging in this entire case is that it ruins the defense's whole theory, and it kind of goes against. It would have painted Kenosha in a bad light, where it would have drawn way more attention to the conspiracy theory, which I'll get into, the conspiracy theory that law enforcement worked with militia and that protesters were intentionally pushed down Sheridan Road to the waiting militia. So it would have drawn more attention and more questions to that element, and it was extremely dangerous for Binger and Krause to put Maurice Freeland on the stand to protect that the truth surrounding the conspiracy of whether or not law enforcement worked with militia. So Jump Kick Man was one thing. Right-wing media outlets took credit for, because that ended up getting leaked out. They took credit for identifying him. It's bullshit. They didn't. I did. Another thing is that, it's basically like protesters were and rioters were the catalyst to everything that went wrong that night, and militia just reacted. Unfortunately, that's not true. We wrote another article, so this is based off, thousands of documents, video evidence, things that we obtained, via open records requests, whatever. But there was actually 13 hours of threat from militia members where their activities and their aggression level was increasing. So law enforcement, you read the article, it's way more detailed than what I'm going to say, but law enforcement spent 13 hours basically leading up to the shooting incident, where they focused primarily on the activity of protesters and couldn't corroborate a single thing. And everything that was coming in about militia, like for instance, pipe bombs that were coming into Kenosha. So the general public never heard about pipe bombs and all these other IED type devices. Like law enforcement did actually find explosive devices scattered around Kenosha, and that was actually from militia members. So we investigated all of that, and it's found that there was 13 hours of this aggressive behavior from militia that was actually the true catalyst of what led to the shooting and all those clashes that you were seeing between protesters and militia members. All these things that were happening in the background, this was all stuff that was just, adding more fuel to this bonfire that was about to happen. So I mentioned the conspiracy theory about law enforcement pushing protesters down Sheridan Road to that gas station where militia was waiting. It's always been a conspiracy theory. Protesters, you will always hear a protester say this was done intentionally. They did this on purpose. We heard Ryan Balch, say that law enforcement came up to him and said, hey, we're going to be pushing these people down towards you guys so you guys can take care of it. And what we found out via open records request with body cam footage and then inside of actual police reports, and we heard it on the police scanner, is that the order was given to push the protesters out of Civic Park and to push them down Sheridan Road to where the militia was and then back away. So it's no longer a conspiracy theory. That was the plan all along. And we found that with, again, body cam video from inside of the Bearcats, and that's from the West Allis Police Department. We found it in the West Allis Police Department reports that they wrote, and we heard it come over the scanner audio as well. And according to West Allis, in their reports, it was done from the command center, which would have been where Sheriff Beth and two other personnel were that were in charge of everything that happened. With that, we had wrote another article based on the timeline of events. So, the general public saw all of the, saw police officers out there. They saw National Guard out there. And the general rhetoric that has gone around is that the law enforcement was outnumbered. And there were thousands and thousands of protesters that were out there. Law enforcement's outnumbered. There's nothing they can do. And unfortunately, that's fucking bullshit. That's just not accurate. We know for a fact that there were over 50 different law enforcement agencies that were out there that sent anywhere from 3 personnel up to, over a dozen. We know that there were over 2,000 National Guard that were there. So between Kenosha's force, which is essentially over 500 between the police department and the sheriff's department, plus all of these other agencies, plus the National Guard, you had over 5,000 different law enforcement and National Guard that were actually out there, which outnumbered the protesters. What's fucked about it is that the majority of those people were stationed like 2 or 3 miles away over at Bradford, and then just over 5 miles away over at the Kenosha County Detention Center. And some of the law enforcement personnel that was sent down from various, cities throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, you had like federal agents that came from Portland, that came from Chicago, other cities. But there were some agencies that did come down. They came down with Bearcats. They came down with riot, gear. And they were basically just standing in a parking lot, or they were sent back to their respective departments. So Kenosha had the opportunity, had access to over 5,000 different personnel, and didn't utilize them appropriately, which I think that would have stopped a lot of the craziness that fucking happened. So it's a major fault on Kenosha. And the catastrophic things that happened not only to the city, but people being injured, people being shot and killed. It could have been avoided had Kenosha utilized the personnel that they had. They didn't set up their actual command center until a couple of hours before the actual shooting. They had just made the decision to finalize where the command center was actually going to be, which was at Bradford. They were originally in the parking lot, and they decided to move indoors. So now they have to take all of this equipment and all these things and set all of this up. So they essentially weren't set up and pretty much like operational until about 15 minutes before the actual shooting happened. Had they been again, it could have altered the course of events for the night. Recently, we've seen, individual named David Hancock, who has taken to Twitter. Hancock is Rittenhouse's former spokesperson. And this man has now flipped on Kyle. So there's a lot kind of behind that. And what I recently found out is that there's a 983-page intel report from Kenosha Police Department on Kyle Rittenhouse. I had sued Kenosha in what's called a writ of mandamus lawsuit for all these different records. It was over 30 different records requests that I had put in. Some of those I won, some I was denied. And in the things that I won, this report should have been one of those. And here we are 4 years after the incident, but 2 years after my lawsuit. And I'm just finding out about this over 900-page intel report. And that is an extremely, extremely damaging report that was sent out. A lot of it's redacted. Through a source, I was able to get another version that's less redacted where we can see a lot more. But there's a lot from just that report that the general public has no idea this thing even exists, what's even, in here. And that's extremely damaging. And that leads to between a source and then this 900-page document where we start seeing Kyle Rittenhouse's cell phone, which has some of the most damaging stuff out of everything that's happened. The cell phone is some of the most damaging when it comes to Kyle Rittenhouse. Who is David Hancock and his relationship to Rittenhouse? So David Hancock was Kyle's alleged spokesperson during the Rittenhouse trial. Kind of the truth behind him. So he's a former Navy SEAL turned private contractor. And he's kind of like, his private contractor stuff is, he owns all these different businesses. He sets up all these like tech things. But he's a very dangerous individual. Hancock is essentially one separation away from Trump. So this is something I've always said, where how close he was to the Trump campaign and to Donald Trump himself. But he's always a separation away from him so that there's plausible deniability. And what we're seeing now from Hancock, where, he's flipped on Kyle Rittenhouse, he's taking to Twitter, he's posting all this stuff, and being pretty abrasive about it, where, Kyle Rittenhouse is a fucking idiot. He's a piece of shit. He's a horrible human being, but he's also posting about Donald Trump, and he's posting about Lynn Wood. So Hancock was connected to all of these people, and doing a lot of, behind the scenes kind of dirty work for all these people. And he's speaking out, to the public now about all this shit that he was involved in. But, you hear about like the Pudgy's Pub incident. So if you guys remember, where Kyle Rittenhouse got caught in the bar with the beer. So most people don't know I'm the one that leaked those photos. So those photos were sent to me via a source. And I leaked those photos out to the general public, to corporate media, the district attorney's office, whatever. And the rhetoric behind the Pudgy's Pub incident is that Lynn Wood and John Pierce were behind this, that they are the ones that set up the Proud Boys to come in and hang out with Kyle. And there was this big party, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So for the record, Lynn Wood and John Pierce had nothing to do with the Pudgy's Pub incident. It was David Hancock. Hancock set that entire thing up. They left Mark Richards' office. There was a court hearing that day. He was given the free as fuck T-shirt to put on, and Hancock had made the phone call to have these Proud Boys show up to Pudgy's Pub. It was a staged incident. It was a staged incident for a photo opportunity, and to get Kyle acclimated in like essentially the beginning of his interaction with militia, which later would have to be spun. Hancock was investigated for a COVID shot scam out in Puerto Rico. The story goes that there was a COVID shot scam that his people within his company had set up, and it was an illegal, it was a scam where they made millions of dollars, and Hancock got sucked into this investigation. He's always able to somehow remove himself where he's not at fault, right? It's always right there, but he's never at fault. And as Rittenhouse's spokesperson, he was sent to be a publicist essentially, and basically spin a narrative to the general public to get people to feel sorry for Kyle, to like Kyle. Anything that came out where it made Kyle in a bad light, it was Hancock's job to figure out a way to spin that story. So that's essentially who Hancock is, right? We found out too later with Hancock, and this is a little bit more after the trial when Rittenhouse was found not guilty, but there was a company that was hired to go after all of the big social media conglomerates, right? So like Google, Facebook, YouTube, right? All these big companies, where if you remember when Kyle was threatening to sue everybody for calling him a murderer, Hancock, being the handler, right, of Kyle, he hired this company to basically scour the internet and find everything that was not in a positive light about Kyle, whether it was a blatant lie or it was something that they didn't like, that they spun into a narrative that wasn't true. Whatever it was that wasn't like favorable to Kyle, this company went and found, and they essentially threatened all these big platforms to basically rid the internet of everything to do with Kyle Rittenhouse. So a lot of people, if you saw social media posts going down, if whatever your favorite, YouTuber or live streamer was, and all of a sudden their channels are gone, or videos were just simply taken down, it was because of that. So, if you look at the internet now, there's very little that you can find about Kenosha when it comes to Kyle Rittenhouse. And that was done because of David Hancock and this company that they hired. So that's a big thing. Hancock essentially coached Kyle on what to say, tried to put him in a positive light with the general public, bought him gifts, right? Bought him this dog, bought him the PlayStation or whatever that he was playing, bought him guns, tried to get him enrolled in colleges, and all these different things. Like, he kind of became like this father figure to Kyle, and it was all fake. It was all to make you fall in love with this kid and think that he was some dumb, dorky, I'm innocent, I just happen to go out and try to clean graffiti in my lovely city that I have ties to. And they painted this image. Hancock created this character that didn't fucking exist, and then tried to basically buy this kid. And it was nothing more than for Hancock and whoever's around him to make money off this kid. Another thing that you hear with Kyle when it comes to like the bond money, right? And there was a big argument about all this bond money, and who gets it, and blah blah blah. So Hancock was a part of that as well. And again, a lot of this stuff is blamed on John Pierce and Lynn Wood. And while, yes, there is some nefarious activities going on with these people, where they're trying to get their grubby little hands on things as well, Hancock is also in the background with these like shell corporations that are also responsible for this. And, Hancock is trying to get his hands on this money as well. So just, more crazy stuff that, again, the general public doesn't really know. And then later, we find out that Hancock, flips on Kyle, right? And he's, again, taking to Twitter. He's posting all this stuff about Kyle. He's posting little images of text messages, documents. Every time Kyle posts something, Hancock is responding to that on Twitter. And the story goes from Hancock that basically Kyle got too big for himself and his surroundings and wasn't listening and was rebelling against this new father figure that had done everything for him, bought him all these things, paraded him around, got him with Tucker Carlson, got him with Trump, got him all these other, interviews and press tours and a book deal and all these things. And he's now flipped on them, right? So the story goes that Rittenhouse was living with him and he stole money from Hancock and damaged the Hancock's house. And that's David Hancock's version. And there was a falling out between the two of them. And, Kyle packs his shit up and leaves in a hurry. Now, one thing, when you hear the story from Hancock about this situation, and it kind of caught my attention where it just stood out and it didn't make sense, where Kyle believes that David Hancock is going to shoot and kill him. And, he says, well, I thought you were grabbing your gun to shoot me. And it was just a weird detail in the story where it was like a detail that didn't matter unless it happened. And again, we need to remove ourselves from it, right? In case like the truth comes out. It's like the kid that says, hey, do you like my new bike? I didn't steal it. What do you think? And it's like, well, why are you saying you didn't steal it? Like, it didn't even cross my mind, right? So if you're saying Kyle stole a bunch of shit, used my credit card without permission, fucked my house up one night, and I'm throwing him out of the house, like, you're putting this weird detail in of, well, Kyle thought I was going to shoot him. I didn't even have my gun on me. Like, it just, I don't know. It's a weird detail. Personally, I think the reason Hancock flipped is because of all of the illegal things that he was doing during the Rittenhouse trial, where now that there's a federal trial against Kenosha and Kyle Rittenhouse has been a named complainant, there's a lot that's going to be coming out. And when these things do start to come out, there are illegal activities that a lot of people engaged in, David Hancock being one of them. And my personal opinion is that, to remove myself from this incident, and I have to be as far away from this as possible, he separates himself and says, I'm going to flip on him. I'm going to give all the information so that there's no backlash on me. I was here for these things, but I had no idea. I didn't know any of this was going on. And it's not believable at all. It's fucked. This person was Rittenhouse's handler. This person was the person that was telling Kyle where to go, when to be there, what to say, any questions, for interviews that you saw, any questions that were asked and then Kyle's answering, all those questions had to be submitted ahead of time. Kyle was specifically drilled with the answers of, what to say, how to respond. And you can see in these interviews where Kyle gets very confused a lot, and he does this like weird, like shifty eye thing. And he's actually looking over, like when you see him like turn his head a little bit and he looks out of the corner of his eye, he's actually looking at Hancock for a response. And that's the thing too, is that there's these like silent cues that were given to Kyle to try to prompt different responses, or to try prompt emotional reactions out of him. He was taught all of this stuff. He was taught this stuff for months, and a lot of it came from David Hancock. So that's who Hancock is. Hopefully that's good enough. What information on Kyle Rittenhouse do you have that the general public is unaware of? So information on Kyle Rittenhouse that's coming out now, that there's really nobody that's reporting on this other than me and my media outlet, is this big 983 page intel report and what the fuck is on Kyle Rittenhouse's cell phone. When you start diving into this big intel report, you start learning a lot more about Kyle. You learn more about what happened that night. It's an inside look into the actual investigation, or lack thereof, in the investigation, and there's a lot of answers that start popping up to questions. And it's unfortunate that the media is not covering this, but everybody's scared because that kid basically fucking threatened everybody and said, I'm suing everyone, and then never did, because it was all a fucking bluff. And that's the thing, right? It's a fucking bluff. And these media outlets don't have access to a lot of these fucking, documents and all these other things, which they easily could have. And he's playing fucking Texas Hold'em, and he's holding fucking 7-deuce offsuit in his fucking hand. And, meanwhile, corporate media's got fucking pocket aces, right? And this kid's like playing like he's got, a fucking royal flush essentially, and he's fucking got nothing. A 7-deuce offsuit, fucking garbage, the worst fucking hand. So he basically scares all these people, and now media won't fucking touch this kid. They won't report on things with him because they're afraid of getting fucking sued. And had they fucking pressed the envelope on this and pushed and actually filed open records requests and fucking sued to get fucking records, right? If they were denied, like I did, then they would have had access to this big ass fucking document. When other things start fucking coming out and you start digging and you start actually fucking investigating, and you realize that there's a source that has Kyle Rittenhouse's cell phone from that fucking time period, right? From the week of the unrest, from the night of August 25th. And you then gain access to that source and what's on that fucking cell phone. And you start looking at Rittenhouse, where it's like, holy fuck. Nobody knew this. Nobody heard about this during the trial. Nobody saw these text messages. Why wasn't any of this brought up? Why hasn't this been fucking presented in 4 years, right? So it's extremely damaging what's on this actual fucking cell phone. And it's like, when you start breaking down this document and what the FBI said and what their investigation was, how much video footage was actually collected, witnesses that were interviewed, breakdowns of videos. There's so much in this fucking report that you don't fucking know, right? And then you get to the cell phone and you're like, Well, hang on a second. The report is saying that we extracted things from the cell phone and then find out they didn't actually extract certain things. Let's see. So let's get into a little bit of that, right? I kind of put this in a different spot, but well, wait. You take the soundbite from this other area because it's going to be a bunch. Compare, contrast Kyle Rittenhouse. You just use this soundbite for the what information on Kyle Rittenhouse do you have that the general public is unaware of? So a big thing that the general public is not aware of when it pertains to Kyle Rittenhouse is this 983 page intel report that was done on Kyle, and via a source, I was able to get via a source. We were able to examine Kyle Rittenhouse's cell phone from the period of the unrest. Compare, contrast Kyle Rittenhouse before and after the trial. He went from being a naive kid to an alt-right hero. He got to meet the president. So, when you first start hearing all these things about Kyle and all these stories are being spun, right? He's just this dumb, naive kid, kind of comes from this broken home. Dad's not around. He's part of this police cadet program. And you kind of have this like sympathy for him and his family that's very low income. They're moving around a lot. And there is a sympathetic element. And I think that's why the public really attach themselves to him, right? And then you have this innocent kid who's out there just washing graffiti off the walls of Kenosha. And now he's out here, he's trying to provide, medical, help to people. And then this mob comes and tries to attack him and kill him. And he defends himself using, an assault rifle. So it's like this perfect fucking story, right? When you just kind of hear it like on its face like that, it's a fucking fairy tale. And it's not fucking real, right? So, but because that fairy tale is pushed out, he becomes a fucking hero to the right. And you got to think too, right? Like we were seeing protests around the country, right? We were seeing lootings and some riotous activities in various cities around the country. And then Kenosha happens where people are shot and killed. And Kenosha then sets the precedent for every other fucking protest and riot that happens across the country, where now all of a sudden militia are emboldened, right? President Trump fucking, basically fucking praises Kyle Rittenhouse for what he did and what happened in Kenosha. He fucking praises that situation. So it emboldens all these militia members to fucking flood the streets and now start beating the fuck out of protesters and Antifa type people, rioters, right? And police are just standing by and they're letting it all happen. Kenosha set the precedent for all of that. And by Trump endorsing what Rittenhouse did, all it did was it allowed people to fucking get hurt and more people to get fucking killed around the entire country. So, fucking January 6th, like we look at January 6th with the insurrectionists, right? But Trump had blood on his hands way before that. And it's because he fucking endorsed what fucking happened in Kenosha and praised this kid. And it allowed the precedent to be set for every other fucking protest around the entire country that happened after August 25th, 2020. We know that not only did Rittenhouse meet with Trump, but we also know that, he had all types of meetings with a lot of other far right radical, people and influential people. We know that he had lunch with Enrique Tarrio, right? The former leader of the fucking Proud Boys. who we later find out is a fucking federal informant. But he had a private lunch. There's pictures that are like very secretly fucking hidden of this lunch. He's being, paraded around with women that are on, TV shows like the Bachelor or whatever the fuck. He, doing all these interviews like you saw with Tucker Carlson and basically this fucking press tour, right? So instead of just going away quietly as somebody that was found not guilty of murder and reckless endangerment and all this other shit, instead of just going away quietly and fucking just handling business, this kid is propped up on a fucking pedestal by more people that want to make money off this kid. And that's another thing where I guess it could be said too, where the general public doesn't realize, and this goes for both sides, fucking everybody thinks that this kid is, a millionaire and he has all this fucking money. And the reality is that he doesn't. He has some money that he's made, but he's like basically being bribed, right? So all of his handlers, whether it was Hancock in the beginning or the people that are handling him now, they're buying this kid whatever he wants. They're parading him around, telling him where to go, what to say. And you can kind of tell, like even when Hancock was his handler, Rittenhouse was not allowed access to his cell phone at all, right? He wasn't able to to use his fucking phone for anything. He had to ask permission to do shit. And that was because they couldn't chance Kyle fucking typing something stupid that ruins the plan, ruins the plot, ruins the fucking story, the narrative that's fucking going out there, right? He cannot fuck this up because there's millions and millions and millions of dollars that people are fucking relying on. So, he's paraded around and then put on this massive fucking pedestal, told what to say, and what that's doing is it's pushing the right's fucking agenda, but it's making people millions of fucking dollars while this kid is just fucking oblivious to all of it. And you're seeing him with, doing body armor fucking commercials and endorsements for that. His fucking book, and then he's posting like weird shit where, you think about it, where, I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse is really nobody, right? But he's endorsing presidential candidates. He's endorsing, senators and things like that. And then Trump makes some kind of like 2A argument, and Kyle puts a post on fucking Twitter about, if President Trump isn't going to fucking support our Second Amendment, I'm not endorsing him. I'm going to endorse this other person. And then all of a sudden Trump comes out and he's like, yeah, protect the guns again. And then Kyle is back to fucking, I'm endorsing Trump for president. He's, posting like very ignorant fucking comments, like about Biden, right? Joe Biden is gay. And then he goes after, other like minority people on Twitter. And like, honestly, I'm not entirely sure that that's actually Kyle Rittenhouse that's doing that. A couple of posts where it just sounds so fucking dumb that like, that's potentially Kyle. But when it's like well-versed, right? That's his handlers that are posting that shit and using him as the face of this fucking post to push whatever rhetoric and an agenda that they're trying to fucking, push out. He's given all these fucking gifts, more gifts than Hancock was giving him. He's got more gifts. People are fucking giving him guns. I mean, the kid has a fucking private arsenal now. He's got 2 ghost guns that we know of. He's got multiple fucking AR-15s, very similar to or exact to the weapon that he used in Kenosha. And then like he does dumb shit because the handlers are fucking pushing him to do certain things where, you know, like when Texas is talking about, you know, seceding from America, and Kyle kind of joins this like free Texas movement. You know, and that's fucking dumb, right? There's laws that were passed down there about shit like this, where this group is essentially labeled as a terrorist group, and he's now aligned himself with this fucking group. So you're put on a fucking terrorist watch list because your handlers fucking told you to, oh, you need to be part of this fucking free Texas movement, you know? Like it's just it's a lot of dumb shit. And I don't think people pay attention close enough to what the kid is actually doing, and where there is potentially this fucking agenda, and where this agenda is coming from, and how they're using him as, you know, as a puppet. They're so like, you know, Biden's a puppet, and Biden is this, and Biden is that. But there's all these other things like little Kyle Rittenhouses that are pushing these different fucking agendas, that you're focused over here on dumb fuck Biden, and you're not realizing the actual shit that's being pushed in front of you. And it's just, I don't know, some of it's fucking comical, but some of it's just fucking sad and pathetic. What did you learn or realize anything from the Kyle Rittenhouse experience? What are your takeaways? So, what are my takeaways from Kenosha, and kind of what I've learned about Kenosha and the events surrounding it? So, essentially, and this is a very long answer, but you know, Kenosha as a whole, you know, the general public thinks that they know what happened, and they don't, right? You know, we've essentially forgot Jacob Blake was shot, and that's what started, you know, this entire thing. And unfortunately, even before Jacob Blake was shot, there was tension that was building up in Kenosha, within, you know, the Black community and law enforcement. There was a lot of transgressions that were going on, and none of that's really talked about. But you forget Jacob Blake was shot and paralyzed August 23rd, and these protests erupt, and this leads to riots, and this leads to, you know, the shooting incident of August 25th. You kind of forget, you know, everyone that was out there, right? No matter what side you were on, you were affected in some way or another. So, you know, everyone that was there is forever fucking affected, forever changed, forever, you know, traumatized, in whatever form that, you know, you participated, or you were in a place and you witnessed something. You know, you're forever affected, and people don't understand that. You have people that can't go out on the 4th of July because of all the pops and bangs, and you have people that watch people get killed right in front of them that are just fucked forever. They're forever traumatized. You know, you have people like Hannah Giddings, who lost the love of her life, right? You know, you have you know, Anthony Huber that's gone forever, and he tried to stop an active shooter. You know, that's, people don't realize that. And like, you know, out of everyone that was involved, like, you know, Kyle's painted up as this hero that, you know, stopped the riots in Kenosha, and he couldn't be further from a hero, right? Like if there's a hero in the story, it's Anthony Huber. And it gets worse with Anthony, where we have a source that allegedly, when Kyle's telling the story to his defense team about what happened, when he's describing the events where Anthony Huber enters the picture, when Huber hits him with the skateboard and then grabs hold of the gun and starts, you know, like running, he has the gun and Kyle's finger is on the trigger, right? Because he just shot at Jump Kick Man. Here comes Huber. Huber grabs the gun, and when the gun is being pulled forward, Kyle's hand is being moved, backwards. And allegedly, according to our source, because that finger gets pulled back when the gun is pulled forward, the shooting of Anthony Huber was an accident. An accident. And if that's true, right? Just think about that for a minute. If Anthony Huber is an accident, it's an accidental discharge, it's reckless endangerment, and that caused, not bodily harm, but fucking death. And that destroys the narrative of self-defense. So if Kyle Rittenhouse's statement is, I shot Joseph Rosenbaum in self-defense because he was running at me, right? Which is a whole nother fucking issue. But then my finger fucking hit the trigger and I accidentally shot and killed this dude. It changes the entire narrative, and now the kid's fucked because now things are not self-defense, and now the kid could actually go to fucking jail, right? Or go to prison. But Anthony Huber would be the hero in the fucking story. And I think out of everybody, he's the actual fucking hero and the only hero. Even when you get to, Rosenbaum, I think everybody in there who's of sound mind can agree that, yes, Rosenbaum chased after him. Yes, Rosenbaum fucking, if he would have gotten to him, Rosenbaum probably would have fucked that kid up, right? I think we can all agree to that. But this bullshit rhetoric narrative that Rosenbaum lunged and grabbed hold of the gun, that's not true. It's not fucking true. Rosenbaum was shot first and fell forward into the gun. And again, according to the source, once they fucking got the DNA evidence from, the entire situation and off of that gun, once they found that Rosenbaum's DNA was on the fucking assault rifle, they spun the narrative that Rosenbaum lunged and reached for the gun. So this bullshit that he lunged, grabbed the fucking gun, and that's why Kyle shot, it's not true, and it doesn't match the fucking video. It was bullshit that was fucking spun. The kid shot him before he fucking lunged at him. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the fucking truth. Other takeaways, just from a live streamer perspective, right? So we're the only reason when it comes to live streamers, whether it was me, Andrew Mercado, CJ Halliburton, Corey Elijah, Lakota Lichtwalt, Richie McGinnis, Kristan Harris, all these people, we're the reason that anybody even has a faint idea of what the fuck happened in Kenosha. It's because of live streamers. We paved the way and made history because of what we did. And then to further that, in the Rittenhouse trial, you have live streamers that are affecting the trial in real time, sending evidence in that's impeaching witness fucking testimony, right? And that happened during the Rittenhouse trial. You had individuals that were named as witnesses that were never called, where had we been called, a lot of the testimony, everybody in that trial fucking lied. And if you were watching any of the main people, myself, CJ, Andrew, if you were watching any of our fucking stream of the fucking trial, every time somebody said something that wasn't true, going on to one of our fucking platforms, one of us filmed something and we fucking were showing that, hey, this person just lied. I fucking videotaped this, whatever. But we impacted that trial in real time. Live streamers did that, right? And the general public, I think maybe as a whole, like there's a small amount of people that do know that. But as a whole, I don't think the majority of people realize that the trial was affected in real time by live streamers that weren't even, actually brought in as fucking witnesses. Um, you know, everyone thinks because, they watched somebody's live stream and they watched the fucking criminal trial that they know what happened in Kenosha. And unfortunately, you don't. You have no fucking idea what happened in Kenosha. That trial wasn't about guilt or innocence. It wasn't about, whether or not Kyle was guilty of murder. It wasn't about justice for the victims. That trial was nothing more than protecting Kenosha's fucking image, which then protects their money. If Kenosha, if specific things would have been said in that trial, or specific things would have came out in that trial, it would have shown guilt on Kenosha and law enforcement that would end up costing them money. And that's why this federal trial is being moved forward now. But it's nothing more. That trial was nothing more than to protect image and money. That's it. It's all it's ever about. And, unfortunately, with the federal trial, even though it's moving forward in the court system, if Kenosha's smart, that trial will never get in front of a jury, because it would be, in my opinion, it would be extremely dangerous and damaging to Kenosha if all of this stuff came out. Stuff that I've written in articles, things that I'm talking about right now. And this is, you're getting a snippet. You're getting a snippet of this. There could be a whole video on this shit. I mean, just the articles that we're pumping out is, again, it's a snippet of shit that is going to come out in this fucking federal trial. But Kenosha would be really fucking dumb if they allowed this to happen. I touched on Kyle's cell phone. So if you look at Kyle's cell phone, so again, from a source, I have access to Kyle Rittenhouse's cell phone, and you compare that with this 983 page intel report, and you see that the Kenosha District Attorney's Office never sent a warrant for Kyle's Snapchat. And when you start seeing the Snapchat messages that Kyle was sending prior to August 25th, and then leading up to that night, and then that night in and of itself, you start seeing a very, very different picture of who Kyle Rittenhouse was. You start seeing that, this kid was wanting to kill people. He was texting about it. He's bragging to his friends that, it's time to go kill people. And when they're kind of bantering back and forth, like, what are you talking about? You can't just go around shooting people. And because of his cadet program and his relationship with law enforcement, he's responding back with, "I wear blue," thinking that because he's a cop that he can just shoot and kill whoever he wants. If you look back at Kyle's interview at the Antioch Police Department, the night he turns himself in, there's a part in that interrogation where he says, he's like requesting like to talk to a therapist. And he says, "I don't want to be one of those cops," and then stops and says, "one of those people." So in Kyle's mind, he's a police officer and he can run around and shoot whoever the fuck he wants. And, you're seeing that around the country with, law enforcement, with all these officer involved shootings. These are the very same people that this kid is around. This is what his upbringing is. He's so influenced with the Trump administration, with law enforcement in this like weird, like aggressive fucking police against citizen, and especially like police against like people of color, where Kyle thinks that he is a cop and he can get away with it. He can shoot and fucking kill people. You've got with the cell phone where, we released an article. We know for a fact, and this is fucking crazy because he says that he went out there August 25th and he wasn't out there prior to that. We know that that's a lie. That's not true. We know for a fact that Kyle Rittenhouse was out on May 31st. He was out June 1st. We have reason to believe that he was out August 16th, August 24th, and then August 25th. So the reason that we know that he was out there May 31st and June 1st, which would have been following the death of George Floyd, where protests were happening all over the place. But there were protests and there were some small looting incidents that happened in Kenosha. Kyle Rittenhouse was sending pictures of himself armed to a Facebook page called the Kenosha County Scanner. Now that page, and again, the article is way more in depth of who runs that page and what that fucking nut job is all about. But Rittenhouse was sending pictures that they're on rooftops patrolling. So he was out there patrolling rooftops prior to August 25th. And we know that in one of the pictures that he's wearing a security uniform. Kyle Rittenhouse was never a licensed security guard. And when you look at the uniform and you look at the name on the uniform, it's the same company that a friend of his by the name of Andrew Reeves worked for. Now, digging in on Andrew Reeves, where, again, through open records requests, we end up getting access to witness statements. And Andrew Reeves' statement is always one of them that stood out. And then you compare that statement with this slight investigation into Andrew Reeves from this 983-page report, and this becomes an even bigger red flag. And you're seeing that Andrew Reeves works for this security company, and you start digging on the security company, and you find out that the security company didn't exist. It fucking closed down a month prior to the shooting incident. So these kids are running around. You have Kyle months before running around in a security uniform, patrolling fucking rooftops, talking and sending text messages about how he wants to kill people, and sending messages that he's fucking bored that he hasn't been able to shoot anybody yet. And you find out that, Andrew Reeves lies to Kenosha Police Department the night of the fucking shooting, right? These kids have months of experience with eluding police, and then you find out, which is even more just fucking baffles my mind, where Kenosha Police Department on June 1st had interaction with Kyle Rittenhouse while he's in a security uniform and while he's fucking patrolling a rooftop. And they talked to him. And whatever the fuck he said that got the police away, there's text messages that show all of this, where he's talking to his friend. Kenosha fucking stops him. He says, hang on, dealing with fucking police. And then the buddy's like, oh shit, like what's going on? Is everything good? And then Kyle finally texts back and says, all good, we're back on rooftops. If you look at the picture itself, Kyle looks like he's fucking 12 years old. So how the fuck, if you're a police officer, do you not see this kid who looks extremely young, does not look like he's 18, has a giant fucking gun in his hand, and you don't ask him for an ID or his, license, his perk card to fucking be a security officer, and who hired you to be here, and ask all these fucking questions, where had they ran his fucking name, had they ran his fucking ID, they would have found out he was not 18 years old. And you're not a security guy unless you're at least 18 years old. So there's heavy fucking restrictions. And had that police officer, Kenosha police officer, done his actual fucking job, that very well could have altered the events of August 25th. And this little fucking kid would have never been out there. Then you start finding out where not only did they're running around pretending that they're fucking security guards, and Andrew Reeves, the night of the shooting, is working for a company that no longer fucking exists. So he's out there pretending to be a fucking security guard. And Southport Marina, hires this fucking company and hires non-licensed fucking security people. But they're lying to the fucking police. And Andrew Reeves is never further investigated, which is just what the fuck. And then you find out that, like Kyle testifies, oh, I never pointed my rifle at anybody. The general public doesn't know that Kyle had a girlfriend at the time. He was talking to a couple of different girls. And in one of the text messages, out of the plethora of messages to these females where he's trying to, be fucking Superman, he's detailing what is happening the night of August 25th. And in one of those messages, he literally says, I just had to point my rifle at somebody. And this is prior to the fucking shooting, right? And he testified that he never pointed his fucking rifle at anybody, but he did. Kenosha, like again, with the Kenosha County scanner page, they never extract those fucking messages. They would have seen that he was out there for basically months in advance, and then the week leading up to it. We know that August 16th, he sent a text message, time to go kill people. And if he was in Kenosha at the time that he sent that message, there was an event that happened in Kenosha. There was a small looting and a small fire that happened. And if he's in Kenosha for that, then he wants to go out and kill people. If he's in Illinois, like for the CBS incident, time to go kill people, he has this mentality that he is literally going out there trying to interject himself into situations where he can actually shoot and injure or fucking kill someone. And again, we see that in all of these text messages that were never presented to the court. They were never extracted from this fucking cell phone. And, he talks about, we heard how much testimony of these kids did not have access to these fucking rifles unless they were going up north to the fucking, cabin. And then the night of August 25th, we know for a fact that is also not fucking true from the cell phone messages. While they're out there patrolling rooftops, this kid's already got body armor. He's got the fucking AR-15. They're driving around in the trunk of their fucking car. And at one point, one of the messages is alluding that they're going back to Illinois and these guns are in the fucking trunk of the car. So they're driving across state lines with fucking guns, big rifles in the fucking car. And to make it even worse than, how much more worse could it fucking be, right? But let's make it worse. Dominic Black's stepdad, again, says these kids didn't have access to these fucking weapons. Here's what's fucking crazy is there are pictures of a group of militia standing on fucking rooftops. Guess who's in the picture? Andrew Reeves' family, Kyle Rittenhouse, Dominic Black, and Dominic Black's fucking stepdad. So these kids did have access to these guns. The question of, is Kyle Rittenhouse associated with fucking militia? If we loosely look at that, the answer is yes. There's pictures of him standing with militia prior to August 25th. And Andrew Reeves, his family, his friends, Dominic Black's stepdad, they have ties to these militia people. So whether that's, a big nationally recognized group or local fucking Kenosha related militia, they're still militia. They're geared up in this private militarized fucking outfits, geared up looking like militia. So in a very loose way, yes, we could draw an inference that he does have ties to militia. He did have racist fucking thoughts, right? There's so much in this fucking cell phone that, again, I released an article on this, and it's only a fucking look into it. And there's other things that we have that we've not released to the public yet. And maybe it'll come up while I'm talking here. I don't know. But, he's out there the week leading up to, the 25th. So, and, again, reason to believe that he was actually out there August 24th patrolling rooftops as well. Again, based off text messages. There's the thought or the question of, did Kyle Rittenhouse see Kevin Mathewson's fucking, Kenosha guard post? And while that's very difficult to answer definitively, again, you can draw an inference that it is possible. So here's why. Again, on the Kenosha County scanner page, that individual that he's posting all the stuff that's happening on the scanner, but he was posting local of events that were going on. So militia people are posting, we're meeting up in this park, we're meeting over here, we're meeting in this place. And this page was posting and sharing all of those posts. We know that Kyle was we know that Kyle was a subscriber to that page. And not only was he a subscriber, but he was also a paid subscriber. So the paid portion of the page was even more, privatized but specific to different information. So there is thought that he did see Mathewson's fucking post. Now, whether he interacted with the page or specifically with Mathewson, we don't know any of that. But there is reason to believe, based on the messages that are in the kid's cell phone, that he saw the post. He had access to where militia was meeting up. And then you start looking at all the people that he surrounded himself with that night. That wasn't an accident. People were tied in together. And, while Kyle may not have known specific people, firsthand, he knew them, through third parties and was introduced to fucking people. This was planned. This was coordinated. This wasn't, I'm going to go out and fucking clean graffiti. They interjected themselves, and they had months of fucking planning of, eluding police and lying to police. The allegedly, again, via a source, we, have reason to believe that, the defense knew a lot of these things and uncovered things that were in the cell phone. The Anthony Huber incident was an accident. They knew a lot of this stuff and never turned things over to the district attorney's office. That's a fucking problem. That's a problem. And I get it. We're trying to defend our client. There's certain things that we don't want people to know. But when you're ultimately fucking, you're hiding a crime, I think there's got to be some ethics behind you holding a fucking bar license, an attorney's license, and withholding fucking evidence. And this goes from self-defense to, how do we not have our client spend the rest of his life in fucking prison? Because this wasn't self-defense. So they hid a lot of information. The fight that we heard about at Bradford Beach, where you see Kyle Rittenhouse, beating the ever-living piss out of some fucking girl. Now, the story that's spun is that, he's defending his sister who's getting beat up. That's not true. That's not true. Fucking the girl that Kyle ended up hitting, the girl called him like a dork or a nerd. And that's what fucking kicked it off. Like the sister and the girl were having a verbal argument, and Kyle interjected, and the girl called him a dork or a nerd. And that's why he started beating the shit out of her. It was not because he was defending his fucking sister. It's because his little fucking pride was hurt. You hear about, again, this goes to like the sympathetic elements of Rittenhouse, but you hear about, he's pulled out of school because he's bullied. He's picked on all the time. Well, he's fucking picked on because he called a black kid the N-word, and the kid beat the shit out of him. And now he's just fucking constantly being picked on because he's fucking racist. So, you start hearing all of this stuff. Other takeaways, right, that the public can fucking look at is, the second garbage truck. And again, I put this out. It ended up pissing off a lot of Kenosha people. It got Kenosha PD on it. It got the ATF on it. I ended up being interviewed over this. But the second garbage truck that was started on fire in Kenosha was done so by a Wisconsin National Guard member prior to him being called to active service. There's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to think of all the shit in the fucking cell phone. Like there's so much to cover that I don't think a couple of minutes in a fucking tiny clip is gonna hit everything. There's so fucking much about that cell phone that's just absolutely fucked. That, not only just images, but fucking text messages to people. And just it's this other side of Kyle that the general public was deprived of. None of us knew this. And you would think that when you start seeing and hearing these things, that this is not some sweet innocent kid that got caught in the wrong place, wrong time. This is like behavior of a fucking sociopath. Is fucking serial killer behaviors and characteristics and traits. Like, this kid is a fucking lunatic. I mean, there's so much fucking, there's so much shit about the cell phone and the fucking 900 some odd page fucking documents. Is Kyle still in contact with his parents and siblings? So throughout this entire process, you know, he's reliant on his family, especially his mom, Wendy, who I think Wendy has gotten a bit of an unfair kind of treatment. Wendy will forever be known as the mother who drove her son across state lines, you know, with a rifle. It's not true. It just simply isn't. I know people want to believe that, but it's not a true statement. She did not drive him across the state lines with the gun. The gun was at Dominic Black his house. It was at the fucking house. The kids had access to the gun, right? But Wendy didn't drive them. But you know, basically they're this tight-knit little family group because they're dealing with all this shit. And you know, somewhere along the lines, because Kyle thinks he's a fucking grown-up now and he's being paraded around the country, he has all these big important people that are befriending him. And you know, Kyle thinks that he has friends now, and powerful friends. And the sad reality is the kid doesn't. He just absolutely doesn't. He's being used and he doesn't realize it. And Wendy and all them didn't realize, even when Hancock and when John Pierce and Lynn Wood and all these fucking people, the first group of handlers, the kid was being used. He's been used since day one. But Kyle thinks he's, you know, a big badass now and he's better than everybody and he doesn't need his family. And to my understanding is that his family has tried everything to get him away from these people, get out of the fucking spotlight, and they don't agree with a lot of stuff that he's doing. And you know, whether it's Kyle's own thought or it's a thought that was put in his head, he has completely alienated, you know, himself from his family. He's pushed them away. He wants nothing to do with them. And you know, it kind of further than with the sob story. You know, you've got one of the girls that, you know, creates a GoFundMe. So now the family is trying to raise money again. And, you know, they've raised, you know, over $7,500 on this fucking GoFundMe already. But, you know, they're claiming all this fucking hardships. And, you know, since the whole Kenosha thing, they've not been able to get a normal life and, you know, all these things. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I look at that and it's like, you know, looking at it objectively, like, sure, I can understand, like, this would not be a normal life, right? Like, there's going to be issue, right? There's going to be some fallback to all this stuff. But how much longer can you continue to fucking claim like hardship and all these fucking things when you yourself are doing interviews, you're going on these fucking YouTubers platforms and giving interviews, long form fucking interviews? Like, stay out of the spotlight and you get your life back. I don't know. I mean, I understand some of the hardship because I've gone through some shit too from having to deal with Kenosha, but at the same time, staying out of the spotlight, right? It's a very different life. So sure, while I do sympathize a little bit, at the same time, like, you know, go fuck yourself, like, knock it off. Where's Kyle Rittenhouse now? What do you see in his future? So, you know, again, realistically, Kyle went from one degenerate fucking handler to another degenerate handler. The kid is being used, and it's for everybody else's fucking profit and gain and power. And he's gonna be, chewed up and fucking spit out. And when they've got him for everything that he's worth and whatever fucking agenda, once they've pushed it as far as they possibly can, they're gonna be done with the kid, and he's gonna have absolutely nothing. And he's alienated his family, and he's gonna be fucked. And that's when the realization for that kid will set in about, or at least you hope so, right? Like, what the fuck did I do? What happened in Kenosha? And then following, like, the realization of everything is finally going to hit this fucking kid. And he's not going to have anything. He's not going to have money. He's not going to have friends. Even his friends that were fucking next to him on August 25th, they're fucking walked away from him. So, allegedly Dominic Black wants nothing to do with the kid. I don't blame him, but you've got all these people that have completely walked away from this kid. So, the short of it is, eventually Kyle Rittenhouse will be forgotten, and maybe he doesn't exist anymore because of that. Maybe that's the best thing for everybody. Is Kyle a hero or a villain? So it's tough, right? When you sit and you look at Kyle Rittenhouse, and you look at one side or one group of people that view Kyle as a hero, and then you look at another side that view him as like a villain, right? For me, I look at this, and there's more that I know than the general public or what the normal person knows. There's more that I've seen at this point. Here we are 4 years later. And for me, if Kyle Rittenhouse turned into the devil himself, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I would have expected it. You've heard him be called like the Antichrist. Like, if he was Jesus on a cross that flipped upside down, I would just say this is a continuation of the fucking poorly written horror movie that I've been watching for 4 years. I don't think he's a hero at all, right? He's a kid that unfortunately did not have the family structure that maybe he deserved or should have had. And it allowed a very impressionable young child to be taken advantage of by very unethical or immoral people that led him into a situation where he wanted to be in a riotous activity that would allow him to seriously injure somebody. And then since then is progressively gotten worse. Is he the devil? Is he the Antichrist? Right? Is he the villain? I mean, even that's like, I think there's a lot of villains in this story, right? I think the only actual hero in Kenosha is Anthony Huber. As far as like a villain, I think there's a lot of villains in this story. You have law enforcement that had every outlet to prevent the city from burning down, to prevent damage, to prevent injury, to prevent great bodily harm, to prevent death. They had every resource, every tactical advantage. They had everything they needed. And if people would if people were privy to the tens of thousands of documents that I have and the thousands and thousands of hours of video footage and just everything that's in my possession alone, plus the lawyer's possession and documentary people, like if the general public had all this stuff, right, and they had the time to go through all of it, you would see that law enforcement is a villain in this story. Kyle Rittenhouse, of course, he's a villain in the story. Joseph Rosenbaum being dropped in the middle of fucking chaos when he's, just released from a mental institution, a villain in the story. Joshua Zeminski, Kelly Zeminski, villains in the story. The militia that were out there, villains in the story. You've got, specific militia, Ryan Balch, Dustin Collette, Joanne Fiedler, all these people, villains. Kevin Mathewson, villain, the worst fucking villain, the man responsible for fucking bringing these people there. Villain. The rioters that came, that used this as opportunistic fucking bullshit to steal and destroy a fucking city, villains in the story. People that have profited off of this, villains. I mean, there's people that set up GoFundMe's and all these other fucking fundraising things where, we're raising money for the people of Kenosha. We're raising money. This person lost their house and, whatever. There's not a single journalist that has been able to track down any money that was raised. So dozens of fucking GoFundMe's that popped up about Kenosha and helping this or helping that. There's not a single journalist that's investigated any of that money that has been able to find it and that it went to something, worthy. It was all scams. So all those people that did that, villains, right? Everybody that spread rhetoric to profit from it, villains. Like documentaries that have come out that didn't actually research or do their job or had access to the right shit, that pumped out rhetoric and profited from it, right? So like the BBC London just launched a documentary and it was bullshit. It was regurgitated rhetoric, and some of the stuff I know for a fact they had actual information and they didn't put it in and instead allowed misinformation and disinformation to go out, and they're going to profit from that. So, anyone that YouTubers or social media influencers or whoever the fuck it is that profited from what happened in Kenosha and spread rhetoric and misinformation and disinformation and didn't do their due diligence to actually investigate this, villains, right? It's very difficult to look at Kenosha and see like positive that happened from it, because so much of it was just fucked. So much of it is just surrounded by lies and money and image and power and greed and it's just fucking wrong. And if you think you know what happened in Kenosha, you have no fucking idea. And unfortunately, that's the fucking sad truth. You have no idea what actually happened in Kenosha. Anyway, I hope that was good. If there's anything I missed, I kind of gave you a lot to try to work with. So hopefully that was all right. If there's anything I missed, anything you want me to touch on different, just let me know. I'll get this emailed off to you. Hopefully this worked. Peace.